Welcome to Letters to Rising Leaders. It's a podcast series about God, soul, love, and leadership. And I'm your host, Tom Mohr. If you're joining along in my book, Letters to Rising Leaders, this is week 48, and the topic is grace. For the past 3 weeks, we've talked about our gifts and our gaps. And then last week, we talked about growth. And today, we're talking about grace. This is all part of our fourth quarter theme, What's Our Call? Grace is the key that unlocks us so that we can pursue our call. Father Richard Rohr often talks about seeing the really real, that in contemplation, we begin to see ourselves and the world more clearly, which enables us to uncover everything before God, to repent everything that needs repenting, and to reveal both to ourselves and to God every wound that needs tending, so that we can receive God's grace. I'd like to share a story about a wound of mine that needed tending. In previous podcasts, I've shared that my mom died when I was 8 years old, and my dad picked up the pieces, of course, when that happened, 3 kids in the family. And I've always admired him, how he responded to the cards he'd been dealt. He just kept moving forward and seeking to love and support us as best he could. Of course, as I've shared in previous podcasts, 3 years later, he found love again, and suddenly we had a Brady Bunch family. 3 kids plus 3 kids equals 6. And in that wonderful, chaotic forming of our family, Dad was a maestro. He was just incredible. Eventually, I left for college. I graduated, and 6 years after that, I got married to Pegeen. And we lived in California in those early years after we got married. Dad and Mom lived in Buffalo, New York, outside of Buffalo. I called him regularly to get his business advice for one, and also I just wanted to catch up, keep in touch. And then when he was just 59 years old, 2 years after Pegeen and I had married, Dad was diagnosed with cancer. Within 7 months, he was dead. My grief was so deep. And I made the decision right away not to fight it. I staggered through the storm, and slowly, over time, I began to come out of the worst of it. But every once in a while, even years later, a random wave would hit me. One of those times happened when our kids were little. It was Sunday. We were at Mass. And when Mass ended, Pegeen took up a conversation with a friend, and she and the kids walked out of the sanctuary. And I found myself stuck to the pew. And as people filed away, I was the only one left in the church. And I was staring at Jesus hanging on the cross. And I was filled with anger. Why, God? Why did Mom die when I was just 8? Why did Dad die barely 60 years old? Who are you to do that? And Jesus hung there, silent on the cross. And of course, it finally hit me. There was Jesus, 33 years old. He died the most painful death. And suddenly, as I reframed my eyes to see what was before me, I felt God's grace and the seeping wound of my grief began to heal. God's grace flows straight from the cross, and it transforms. It unlocks. It brings us deep internal freedom. Dear leader, this world needs you to be a leader of goodness in our churches, our communities, our cities, our nation, our world, our planet. We so desperately need a new generation of leaders to rise. But before you can be an effective servant leader in the world, you got to get through the stuff that is tied up inside your soul. And that takes a journey with Jesus and an open set of arms to receive God's grace. I'm going to leave it there. The song for today is Amazing Grace. Kelly Kadlec, Tom Kleinschmidt, Robert Berry, join me in harmony. Enjoy.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see.
Amazing grace.
'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first we have already come. 'Twas grace that brought us safe thus far, and grace will bring us home.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Well, that's it for today. I hope you'll join us next week for the next episode in this Letters to Rising Leaders podcast series. As I say each week, leader of goodness, go in faith to love and heal the world.